This is a 50-year-old male with a 15 centimeter retroperitoneal mass. So this is the challenge of this case is we see lipoblast, no question. And for anyone who needs a refresher on lipoblast, for pleomorphic lipoblast, what we want is a big, ugly pleomorphic nucleus. And then the vacuole, then the cytoplasm will have these clear vacuoles that are perfectly round and sharply circumscribed because they're lipid droplets that have washed out during processing. And because they're actual lipid droplets, they're non-compressible. They push everything out of the way, including the nucleus. And so what you'll see is that they often tend to scallop and push in on the nucleus. They don't have to do that, but they often do. So the question here that you can encounter is whether we should call this pleomorphic liposarc because it has pleomorphic liploblasts, a D-diff liposarc, or a well-diff liposarcoma. So I actually think that this is a really crazy, exuberant example of a well-diff liposarcoma because it has scattered, very big, ugly pleomorphic liploblasts, but very hypocellular, right? And in addition to that, there's a lot of mature fat mixed in with this thing. And the mitotic activity relatively low. There's occasional mitoses, but the alternative is you could think, well, maybe this is D-diff that just has a ton of lipoblasts. Most of the time, D-diff liposarc surprisingly does not have lipoblasts. There are exceptions to that rule, but in general, D-diff liposarc tends to look like a high-grade sheets of pleomorphic spindle cells, just like an undifferentiated pleomorphic sarcoma, but growing next to or at the same site as a well-diff liposarc, where a well-diff used to be, or right next door to a well-diff liposarc. So well-diff can run a range from ones that look almost totally like lipomas and only have rare atypia or sometimes even no atypia. That's uncommon. And then other times they can have tons of atypical cells, including tons of lipoblasts. So ones like this, though, I sometimes would struggle with. In the end, I think we decided that this is probably actually a well-diff that just has really crazy amount of lipoblasts. But I think that you could easily make the argument that, well, maybe there's too much atypia for that. The one thing that helps me is if I take away the scattered atypical cells and lipoblasts, am I left with a high-grade sarcoma in the background? And if the answer is no, then in general I tend to be more on the side of well-diff liposarc. So, but this is an example of a challenging one that's not a classic straightforward, but I like this one because it's so nice to be able to easily see really good example of lipoblast. I mean, they're just everywhere here. All right, so for well-diff liposarcoma, let's see, what is the molecular abnormality that we would expect to see?
MDM2.
Yeah, MDM2 amplification, and you can also see other genes like CDK4 and some others that are amplified as well. So you can test that with immunostains, or my preference is to use FISH, but I know people that like using immunostains too because they're a little quicker and easier to get a hold of in some other labs. So, all right, so well-differentiated liposarcoma with really bizarre scattered pleomorphic lipoblasts.